Let's go to the next section, that's animation. In animation there are two parts, one is keys and other is tools. In keys part we have some tools to control keyframes, and in tools there are other special tools to create different animations. We first examine the keys. The first option is select keyframes. Let's go to its setting to see what options it has. Well, I created an animation so we can work on its keyframes. The first option is time. With the time option you can specify the keyframes of which frame to be selected. Let me set it to time mode. For example, at second 4 and frame 9, I specify for it to select the keyframes of my comp. The time option can be applied when you deactivate the current time. So here you can type the time you wish. For example, second 4 and frame 9. I copy this and paste it here. So the keyframes are here. The time option will be selected. Well, here I choose all layers, so it selects the keyframes of all layers, and here I don't want just to select the keyframes of the controllers, but want all the keyframes of all layers to be selected. Here you also specify whether the keyframes created for the position, rotation, scale, opacity, mask, or the effects which want to be selected or not. When red they are selected. And when you want to deselect all, you click this, so all will be deselected, and if you click it once more, again all will be selected. Now I've specified the time and click on select button. As you see, all the keyframes at the time I've specified, that second 4 and frame 9 are selected. Well, this is the first option of the time. And the second option here is range. In the range option you can select, for example, the keyframes that are between seconds 4 and 5 frame 13. You can type 5 and 13 this way too. All the keyframes that are between the two times will be selected. Well, now I click select. As you see, all the keyframes that are between these two times are selected. The next option is current time. When you check this option and the first option is on the time mode, all your keyframes that are located where the indicator is will be selected. For example, I set the indicator at second 5 and frame 5 and click select. As you can see, only these two keyframes are selected, because only these two keyframes are located where the indicator is. Well, if we set the time option on range mode, then all your keyframes will be selected. This is also the all layer, which is clear to be for all layers. Select layer option only selects the keyframes of the layer you select. All layers, as you can see, selects the keyframes of all the layers, and the controller selects only the keyframes of the controllers. You can see this also as I explained. Copy, for example, now I copy these keyframes and want to paste them here. To paste them, I don't use here anymore, but return and click paste animate. You see my keyframes are created again. Let's go back to the main window of keyframes. The next item to explain is this option. This option is for editing your keyframes. For example, now I select this keyframe and click on one of these modes. You see this changes to easy ease. Well, if I click on this icon, its shape changes. And this is to create keyframes in these modes. For example, now I go to frame 15, select position and select one of these modes. As you see, a keyframe in that mode is created. So this is for creating and this for editing of the keyframes. Well, I delete this. Here is preset. I'll explain this after this option. Let me first give an explanation about the different modes of keyframes.
If you've created an animation as default, for example, like this circle that moves from one side to another side of the scene, your keyframes will be linear. That is, from the start to the end of your animation, the speed of the circle is the same. To see the animation speed better, I select the keyframes and click on the graph editor icon. In this window, when a speed graph is enabled, the speed of animation is shown here, and as is clear, the speed of the animation is calculated in pixels per second. For example, here the speed of my animation is 1093.24 pixels per second, and until the end of the animation the speed is the same. This mode of the keyframes is called linear. But the three other modes that you can specify for animation speed are easy ease, easy out, and easy in. Well, easy in means that the end of your animation will have a slower speed. For example, select the keyframes, right click, and choose easy in from keyframe assistant. When I choose easy in and enter graph editor, as you can see it shows the animation speed like this. At first, its speed is 1093.24, then it grows faster and at the end reaches 0. Look how the circle moves. At the end its speed grows slower. Now to make it more clear, I slow down its speed at the end. If I play, you'll see its speed at the end grows much slower. Well, easy out is exactly the opposite mode, where the speed is slower at the start of animation and will grow faster when reaching the end. So I select these two keyframes. First I make them linear by control and clicking, and then select easy out. Now if we go to the graph editor window and look at the speed, you see that this is exactly the opposite of the previous one. I increase the speed to make it more clear. And if you look at the composition window, you'll see that these points, which indicate the position of the layer in different frames, are more concentrated at the beginning of the animation. So naturally the speed of the layer will be slower at the beginning. As you see, the animation speed is slow at the beginning and will be fast at the end. Easy is somehow a combination of easy in and easy out. Thus the animation speed is slow at the beginning and the end, and will be fast in the middle. Well, I come back and select the keyframes. I make them linear and then right click, keyframe assistant and easy ease. If I come back to graph editor, you see that the animation speed is 0 at the beginning, then reaches its peak and drops to 0 again. To make it clear to see, I increase these and these too. Look, it's slow, then fast, and again slow. Let me increase it to see it better. As you see, at the beginning and at the end it's slow, and in the middle faster. And also you can see it in the frame concentration. Well, after getting familiar with different keyframes modes, I wanna change the next layer that I've created before and has a linear animation exactly like first layer to easy in mode using Duik. So first I select its keyframe, then use the left slider to apply easy in and the right slider to easy out animation. Well, I set the left slider to 50 and go to graph editor window. As you see, the speed is very high in the beginning and by getting closer to the end it gets slower. As I said, the speed in easy in mode slows down at the end. First this layer surpasses the upper layer and moves slowly at the end and they stop together. A good feature of this tool is that you can easily change your graph without having to engage with the graph or the handles. Well, let's go to the next layer, which is in a linear mode and we wanna specify easy out mode for. To do this, we select its keyframes and use this slider to apply easy out. Set it to 50 and go to graph editor. I should also note that when the slider is set to 50, to apply easy out to your animation, you should also set the left slider, which is on easy in mode, to 0, so it will be completely on easy out mode. As you see, in the beginning the speed is slow and to the end it grows fast.
In order to control the low and high speed changes, just change the slider. Slow in the beginning and fast at the end. Well, let's return to the layers. We want to create an easy ease mode for the last layer. To do this, I first select the keyframes and set the two slider to 0 and activate lock tangents here. The two sliders are locked together and you can apply both easy in and easy out together that will result in easy ease. Well, I set it to 50, you see both grow together. Let's go to the graph editor and it shows such a graph. Let me slow it. Its speed is slow in the beginning, fast in the middle, and in the end slow again. We set it to 80 so we can reduce its speed in the beginning and the end. It's also clear from this point. Well, this option is switch ease and allows you to switch between easy in and easy out. The next option is velocity or acceleration that allows you to control the speed of the easy in mode for your layer here. Now the speed is 0, but if you wanna increase its speed so that it stops with more velocity, you can set it manually by bringing it up. So hold shift key so it moves up directly and now it stops with the speed of 496 pixels per second. You can do this manually or you can first select your keyframes, enter 500 using the left box for the ending keyframes and click on velocity. As you see, now the speed of 500 is allocated to it. If you wish you can increase it more to 5000. Now you see this speed will grow up. For the beginning you can also use this option. For example, I increase it to 5000. If you lower this, your speed will be constant. Well, this is velocity and this is also for locking velocity in and out. This option is also for when you're satisfied with the ease and velocity of this keyframe and want to save it. So you select this keyframe and click on this option. After you click on it, its ease value is shown here and its velocity here. For example, I select this keyframe. As you see, for this keyframe, easy in is 1, easy out is 83, and its velocity is 0. If I select this keyframe, its easy in and easy out are these, and its velocity is 5000. And this keyframe also has these values. For example, I'm satisfied with the ease and velocity of this keyframe. So I save it and here its values are shown. Then here by clicking on this plus, you can create a preset from it. Well, I click on this plus and here it is created 8080 and 00. Let me unlock it and for example I set it to 70. And now to make it clear, I select this, click pick and create this preset of 8070. As you see, its preset is created. And I wanna specify for this keyframe exactly the same preset. So I select the keyframe and choose 8070. So I apply this preset to this keyframe. For example, if you don't want a preset, you select it and click on minus. And this option allows you to apply a keyframe mode without saving its preset. For example, I select this keyframe, pick it, and wanna apply the same mode to this keyframe. Click on this option and the same mode will be created for it. One of the uses of the velocity is that, for example, you've created an animation for this ball and want it to jump up and down and stay a little bit in the air when jumping. To do this, you select the keyframe at which the ball is at the top and easy it. First, I like this and set it to 80. Look what happens. Well, it's not true because the ball was supposed to slow down, not to stop at the top. We don't want it to stop at the top. So to solve this trick, you can just select the keyframes, enter Graph Editor, and choose Edit Speed Graph. Let me click on it to show all the keyframes. You see now the velocity of the keyframe at which the ball locates on top is 0. That is, its speed is 0, and hence the ball stops there. For this not to happen, I select this keyframe, set its velocity to 300 and click. When I click, it comes up. Now it's getting better. If you see its pause is low, you can set it to 100 so that it pauses more at the top, but doesn't stop at the top. As you can see, it no longer stops. Well, this is one of the good uses of velocity. Let's go to the next option, that's cleaner. This tool will do many different tasks. For example, it fixes the interpolation of the keyframes and removes the keyframes that aren't effective in the animation and are somehow unnecessary. Well, to better know the uses of this option, let's go to its panel. Here is a special interpolation. So for example, I've animated this circle. I press U key to see the keyframes. Now, if I select the keyframes and right click, in keyframe interpolation, here are temporal interpolation and spatial interpolation. Well, this first option, spatial interpolation, is exactly the same option. The same option is simply shown as icon for us here. In a spatial interpolation section, you can specify an interpolation for the movement path of your layer. This interpolation is auto Bezier. Now I set it to linear. If I set it to Bezier, the same previous mode is shows again. Bezier out makes only the beginnings of the keyframes smooth, and Bezier in for the end. Well, AutoFix option fixes the spatial interpolation of some animations that sometimes come up with problems. For example, I've animated this square to move to the right, and from here to here it's supposed to stay unmoved. As you see, the value of these two keyframes is exactly the same, but nevertheless the square moves while it shouldn't move. Well, for such cases we can use this option. We select the keyframes. Now, since I haven't yet explained these, I deactivate them. Only AutoFix is enabled and click clean. As you see, this is no longer the case and it no longer has any extra moves and moves completely naturally. Well, the next option is smart interpolation that makes your keyframes smooth and easy. For example, now I select the keyframes. You see, if I go to the graph editor and edit the speed graph item, you'll see that my animation speed is linear and not smooth. To apply this option, I select the keyframes. I enable this option and turn these two straight lines into two curved lines and click clean. We go to graph editor and see that the animation speed is made easy. From here the speed increases and decreases and again increases and continues. This option is easy start, that is for the start of your animation, and this is easy end for the end of the animation. And if this option is enabled, the middle keyframes will be made automatically easy. For example, I make this linear and disable its easy start and click clean. You see its beginning speed no longer starts from 0, but it starts from 1800 and its end reaches 0. Well, if I do the same for easy end and click clean, you see that the beginning and the end aren't easy. Well, the next option of cleaner panel is clean keyframes. Let's go to the example. In this example, I've animated this circle and created my keyframes. Now I select them all, enable clean, and click clean. As you see, when I click on it, the two keyframes of the beginning X and Y position are removed. Why? Because from here to here, I have no chance for these two position axes. So it removes the beginning keyframe, and the same keyframes that somehow really have no effect in my animation will be removed by clicking on this option. Let me return them to the first state. So if our animation has no problem in its interpolation and they are all smooth and there is no extra keyframes, this option won't work for us. Well, let's go to the next option, that's copy animation. This option copies the animation we've created not only in a layer, but in several layers. For example, I've animated the circle and want to copy this animation. So I select the keyframes and paste them at second 3. You see the circle returns and jumps again. Let me delete this to go to the setting of paste animation. Well, I copy these keyframes again. We enter the panel of paste animation. Here the first option, absolute, does what we did as default. Reverse keyframes does this just reversely. For example, I enable this option and at second 3, click on paste button. Look at this, how it jumps and returns again. The next option is to replace existing keyframes that while enabled, and you select the keyframes and click on copy button and then paste. It replaces all the keyframes to where the indicator is. Well, let me undo that. I select the keyframes, copy them and enter the panel. The next option is offset. Offset is a very interesting option. As you see, this ball jumps and stops here. And if I wanted to jump and go ahead, I need to animate this ball again. But by this option you can do it easily. First we select the keyframes, copy them, and while offset is chosen, click on paste button. So look at this, how it has become. Let's go to the second part of animation, that's tools. Here in tools panel we have several different tools. The first tool is AEFFF switch. This tool allows you to easily switch between IK and FK. Well, I first select the hand controller and bring it up. As you see, the controller is set to IK mode as I explained before. Now, if I want to switch IK to FK manually, I go to FK control in IK hand and disable it. You see now FK is enabled, and to control FK we go FK in individual control, and here you can control the arm joints. So I return it to the first state, IK is enabled. So it was set manually. Now if you want to use this tool, you can go for example at second one, select the controller and click switch. The difference between this option and manual operation is that when you click switch, the hand no longer turns back to its first state. And also FK will be enabled and it will be created a keyframe for your layer. You see now it's off and a keyframe is created. You go forward and want it to return to IK mode, so click on switch button. It doesn't do that, because there is a bug here, and don't turn it back to the first mode. And even enter the panel and click snap FK to IK, it doesn't return to IK mode. And you should come here and click on it. So it returns to IK mode. Animation Blender has already been explained in link and constraint panel, and here we no longer involved with it and go to the next option. The next option is motion trail. This tool draws the trajectory of any layer in a shape layer and makes trails behind or in front of them. Here I've created a simple to see exactly what this tool does. As you can see, the cursor has a trail that follows behind it when it moves. You can make this trail by this tool. As you see, everywhere this cursor moves, this trail follows it too. For example, I select the cursor and move it up. You see, as the cursor moves up, the trail shape also changes. And here, I want it to be here. Look how the trail moves. It was changed completely. So let's see how to do that. Let me undo that to correct the cursor animation. So I delete these layers. As you can see, now the cursor has no trail. To create a trail for it, we click on its layer and go to Motion Trail panel. Here you can specify the trail to be created in the same layer or in a new layer. I choose create a new layer. You can also specify its color here. I choose black and click create. As you see, as I click create, a path line is created for the beginning of the animation to the end, where the cursor goes up and stops. Well, a new layer is also created in the timeline. When we click on this layer in Effect Control window, you can specify for the trail to be behind the cursor or in front of it. In frames option specifies behind the cursor and out frames in front. I don't want the trail to be in front of the cursor, but I want it behind. So I set the out frame to 0 and the in frames to 10. And for the line path not to be on the cursor, I put its layer below the mouse layer. So let's take a look how it is. As you see, so simply you can do it. Now, if you want to do this work professionally and create trails on the corners of the cursor, what should we do? Since motion trail option does this based on the anchor point, first you need to create a null object and place this anchor point on the corner of the cursor. Duplicate this null and place here and another one on this step. After you place the nulls, parent them to the mouse layer, so by moving the cursor these nulls also move. Then delete this layer. Let's select the 3 nulls and click create again. You see the motion trail layer is created and 3 motion trail effects in effect controls. So I bring this layer again below the mouse layer. I set their out frames to 0. Then I set this one to -7. And I set this to -5 and this one to -3. That's good. Well, in effect controls, here you can specify your source. And here are in and out that I explained. Sampling option is for the smoothness of this line. For example, if I make a high curve in the mouse layer, you see the trail will be broken. To avoid this, we increase its samples to make it smoother. Well, using the next option, you can specify the color of the trail. Opacity is also the degree of its transparency, and let's determine its diameter. The next option is Extrude. With this option you can create a stop motion mode for your animation, or you can change the exposure of your animation. To do this, we click on Extrude button. When you click on this option, a layer called Extrude is created that extrude effect is on it. The mode option is set to frame duration, and the frame duration values is set to 2. That is, the animation will be exposed every 2 frames. As you see, the character's motion is similar to a stop motion. Let me set it to 5 to see it better. Well, the next option is Extrude. This option does exactly the same work, except it doesn't expose the animation every 5 frames. Rather, it does it relative to the keyframes you have created for Extrude, and no matter the checkpoint is active or not. Well, I create the first keyframe, I add a keyframe here, and another one here, here, and here. As you see, the animation no changes until it reaches to next keyframe. Exactly where we've created keyframes, the animation is exposed. So, the next option is layer marker. This option changes the exposure of our animation according to the marker of this layer itself. For example, I create a marker here and a marker here too. Now, as you can see, as it reaches the markers, the animation changes. Well, the next option is comp marker, which changes the animation according to the markers on work area. For example, I create a marker here and another one here. Look, when it comes to this marker, it changes. So, you can apply this option in two ways. The first way, as I explained, enter a comp and click on exit. And the second way, you can select the property like position and then click on exit. Here I've created a simple animation for this simple and want to apply this option to its property. So it can also be applied on properties. Well, let's go to the panel of this option to explain auto detect. This option, according to the animation of the layers, detects the best frame for exposure automatically. Now I select the layer position, enable auto detect and click create. And now you can see which frames are exposed. It does this work automatically. The next option is time remap. Time remap is a quick way to activate time remapping on the selected layers while automatically adding some useful expression like looping. It works like time remapping, except that when you press Alt-Ctrl-T and enable time remapping, in the last frame you won't have enabled because your comp ends up and won't continue. But if you use this option, let me click on it, your ball won't disappear at the last frame. And the other point is that you can choose to apply loop in or loop out to it. Now loop out is enabled as default. Let me undo that. As you see, this comp has such an animation, and when the ball reaches here the comp ends up, but I want it to continue and loop. To do this, I select the comp and click on this option, and for as long as your comp continues, this loop operation will go on. Let's go to the next option, that's extract controller. Well, this option is for extracting the controllers from the pre-comp. In this example, I select this comp in project panel and I put it in another comp. Now I want to extract the controllers from the characters comp and have them in this comp. I want just the controllers and don't want all the layers to be extracted. So I select the comp and click extract controllers. And then you have the controllers here and can easily animate them. Let me enable its IK, and you can animate your character here easily. The next option is cell animation. This tool is used in conjunction with After Effects Paint Effects to create traditional hand-drawn animations. For example, I click on single layer and then click new cell. When I click on it, a layer called cell is created. To start animating, we should double click on this layer. Then we go to layer control panel. Here I fit it and create a simple animation by brush tool. Well, let's start. First I draw the first frame, then we click on this option and we go to the 2 frames ahead.
As you see, the last drawing is disabled with low opacity. And continue this work. And finally we go to the composition window, and when you play you see your animation is created. As you see, by playing the animation, a few frames earlier are displayed. This is because you've enabled onion skin here, and here you can specify the number of frames. Well, the next options are in and out, that here you can specify whether your drawings before the main frame or after it are disabled or not. The in option displays the frames before the main frame. An out, which is now enabled and its opacity is 50, works the opposite way. For example, I delete this. Now, first I create a layer by new cell 2, then enable infrared, and then I select the brush tool, double click on the layer, and create an animation. Well, now if I display this animation, you see this is the main frame and the layers before the main frame are disabled here. And if you don't want the animation to be displayed in onion skin, you can display this option. As you see, only the main frame is displayed to you. Well, this option is animation exposure. That's the duration between each drawing. It means that when you draw and click on this option to go ahead, it goes 2 frames or any number you specify here forward. Let's go to the camera panel. The first option here is camera rig. This option enables you to have better control over the camera. Well, I've created a text and a camera in this composition. To apply this option, we click camera and click on camera rig. When I click on it, 3 nulls are created. With this we can have different controls over the camera. Well, to see it better, I go to the custom view. I start with this layer, that's target camera. This option controls the point of interest of the camera. In fact, if I change the position of this controller, you'll see that the point of interest of the camera will move. Well, let me split the window. I specify here for active view and here remains for custom view. So look what happens. This is the same point of interest of the camera and controls it. The next null controls the position of the camera. Look what happens. And the last null controls the previous 2 controllers together. So let's see what happens. It controls both point of interest and position of camera together. Well, the next option to talk about is Scale Z Link. To see clearly what it does, I animate 2 layers in the Z-axis, and naturally when they go back, their size becomes small. This option causes when your layer goes back, its size doesn't change. To apply this option, first we create a camera. We select the layer, then we select the camera and click on Scale Z Link. When I click on it, its size changes. To turn it back to its previous size, we go to AEFFF controls and set it to the size it had before, about 28. Now if I play, you see that it moves in the axis, but its size doesn't change. To see it clearly, I go to the custom view and we look it from here. You see at first it's small, and when it goes back it gets bigger so that its size doesn't change in active camera window. So let's go to the 2D camera option. We go to this composition and want to create a 3D movement for our layers while our layers are 2D. To do this, we click on the 2D camera And as you see, it creates a layer that in its effect controls the effect of 2D camera, and also it creates the L3 and L1 layers. To create a 3D movement for your layers, you need to parent the layers closer to the camera to L3 layer. In this example, the 3 layer is the closest layer to the camera, so I parent the 3 layer to L3 layer. The layer in the middle that has a normal speed when moving should be parented to L2 camera layer. And the farthest layer which contains this cloud should be parented to L1 layer. For the layers of home and back trees, I duplicate L1 layer twice and parent home layer to L4 and the back trees to L5. It's also to note that if I click on each of these knobs, you see for each one in their effect controls, there is an effect called camera influence that this value specifies the depth of your layer. As I said, the L3 layer is for the front layer and its influence is 120. I set it to 150 to look closer to the camera. For L1 layer, I set it 50 so that in motion the clouds look farther to the camera. For the next node that the houses layer is parented to, I set it to 80. And this node that the back trees are parented to, I set it to 90. In order to create a 3D movement, I select L2 camera layer, show its position, and by animating its x-axis you can see how it looks as if the camera is moving in 3D space. You can also do the same in y-axis. As I said before, to this layer a 2D camera effect is applied. By this option you can create a horizontal pan. And by this one you can create a vertical pan. And this is for zooming. This is track in and out. As you can see, it creates a 3D movement. And this is for tilt or rotation. By the advanced behavior option, you can specify the type of camera movement. For example, if it's on hand mode, it looks as if the camera is on hand, and this is shoulder and the other types. For example, I choose hand. As you can see, it looks as if the camera is on the hand and shakes. In general motion, you can specify the amount of this movement. If it moves too much, you can set it to 2 to decrease its movement. In shake, you can increase its shaking movement. Advanced also is for its random movement. As you see, you can change its movement randomly. So to explain the next option, I create a column named framing guides. I click on framing guides option. It creates 4 effects as default. And here it creates guides and grays to create a good composition in the scene. The first effect that's created is frame, by which you can control the black frame of your scene. These are its different presets. You can adjust it to custom mode and specify its value yourself. And in appearance item you can specify its color. Here you can set its opacity, and its stroke size is enabled if you set its mode on a stroke. And this is for the size of your frame. For example, its height is 1920 and 803 is its width. Well, let's go to the next effect. Let me set the opacity of the frame effect to 0 to see the next effect clearly. The next effect here is girth. Here you can specify how the guides or girths are placed. Then in offset you can change their positions. Here you can change its scale. And here is its rotation. Here is its opacity. And here is stroke size. And then here is its color, and here flip. These effects also do the same to have two guides together. For example, once you have placed a guide this way, and also you want to place the other one another way. You can add as many guides as you want. Well, the last option here is import TV Paint camera that you can use to import the cameras you've created in TV Paint into the, and we haven't dealt with because we don't have its software and it's not so useful for us.